the scent of a lost world, a scent of saffron, rosewater, and ancient fire temples, still clung to Pirouz's memory, a ghost in the arid air of Medina. He, a master artisan of Sasanian Persia, was now a captive of the Rashidun Caliphate, his fate sealed by the clash of empires at Nahavand. Pirouz's hands, which once crafted jewels and grand structures for the court, were now bound by the servitude he owed to his Arab master, Al-Mughira. Yet, it was not the physical shackles that weighed on him most, but the psychological burden of a defeated nation. His story, and the fate of countless other enslaved Persians, reveals the brutal reality of conquest. The conquest of Persia was not merely a shift in political power. It was a societal upheaval that shattered the Sasanian world. For the Zoroastrian warriors who once served the King of Kings, defeat meant enslavement or death. The proud Sasanian elite were forced to flee, their traditions and privileges lost in the wake of the conquering armies. Entire cities fell to the invaders, their libraries and palaces burned, and populations were subjected to massacre or capture. Among the captives were men like Pirouz, whose skills and strength were now property to be exploited. But the fate of Persians extended beyond the battlefield. Historians document widespread enslavement following key battles. The governor of Sakistan, for example, surrendered 1,000 enslaved boys and girls as tribute to save his people from further harm. In other regions, women and children were taken captive and sold in slave markets across the growing Islamic empire. Even those Persians who chose to convert to Islam were not fully integrated into the new society. They became mawali, a term often translated as freed slaves, and were considered inferior to Arabs. They faced social and political discrimination, and in the early Umayyad period, an era of pronounced Arab supremacism, they were barred from certain rights and positions. Non-Muslim Persians, particularly the remaining Zoroastrian communities, were forced to pay a special tax known as jizya. This was not merely a financial burden. Some accounts describe how the tax collectors would deliberately insult and humiliate the payers as a sign of their subjugated status. Those who could not pay faced imprisonment, enslavement, or death. Historical accounts also attest to acts of rape and sexual violence against Persian women during and after the conquest. Some women were forcibly taken as concubines, their dignity stripped away as a symbol of the conqueror's power. Pirouz Nahavandi was a microcosm of this larger tragedy. He was a man of skill and intellect, forced to serve a master who, in his eyes, represented the injustice and oppression of the new regime. When he appealed to Caliph Umar about his excessive tax, his complaint was not just about money. It was a desperate plea for recognition of his humanity. Umar's dismissal of his plea, citing his skill as justification, was a final insult, reinforcing Pirouz's status as a disposable possession rather than a person. For Pirouz, the assassination of Umar was not merely a personal act of vengeance, but a strike at the heart of the system that had enslaved his people. It was a symbolic act of defiance against a caliphate that had stripped Persians of their land, their religion, and their dignity. His actions became a patriotic act of resistance for Iranian nationalists. Pirouz's story, therefore, is a window into the darker side of conquest and the human cost of empire building. It reminds us that behind the grand narratives of military victory and political change lie the silenced stories of those who suffered and were forced to endure, and the potent, often tragic acts of rebellion that are born from a deep sense of injustice.